Before we begin, subscribe, because some secrets stay buried for decades, and some killers believe they escaped forever. But tonight, DNA is about to change everything. The rain hit the windshield like tiny bullets. Detective Sarah Bennett sat inside her car, staring at the old house across the street. Small, quiet, white paint peeling from the walls. A porch light flickering like it was tired of staying alive. Inside that house was a man named Richard Hale, 72 years old, retired carpenter, grandfather of 4, the kind of man neighbors described as polite and harmless. But tonight, Sarah wasn't here because of the man he pretended to be. She was here because of the blood he left behind 34 years ago. She checked the file on the passenger seat one more time. Case number 1988 to 0417. Victim, Emily Dawson. Age, 19. Status, unsolved. For 34 years, Emily had been a ghost. A college student who vanished after leaving her night shift at a diner in Portland, Oregon. Her car was found near the river, her purse still inside, her keys on the floor. No signs of robbery. No witnesses. Only fear. 3 days later, her body was discovered in the woods 20 miles away. The case shocked the city. Everyone wanted answers. But answers never came. The killer disappeared like smoke. And Emily became another cold case file collecting dust in a locked cabinet. Until now, Sarah touched the small DNA report in her hand. That single paper had changed everything. Not fingerprints. Not confessions. Not luck. DNA. A drop of blood under Emily's fingernail. Too small to matter in 1988. But in 2026, science had learned how to listen to whispers. And the whisper had led them here. To Richard Hale. Her partner, Detective Marcus Reed, stepped out of the unmarked car behind her and walked over. He leaned down by her window. "You ready?" he asked. Sarah looked at the house again. "No," she said. Marcus nodded. "Good. Means you still care." She grabbed the file and stepped into the rain. The porch creaked under their shoes. Sarah knocked once, then twice. A few seconds later, the door opened. Richard Hale stood there wearing gray pajamas and reading glasses. He looked confused, then nervous, then something else. Recognition. Not of Sarah. Of fear. "Mr. Hale," Sarah said calmly, "we need to ask you some questions." He looked at the badge, then at the rain behind them, then back at Sarah. His voice was dry. "About what?" Sarah held up the old photo. Emily Dawson smiled from 34 years ago, forever 19. Richard stared at it. His face changed. Only for a second. But Sarah saw it. That tiny crack in the mask. And she knew. He remembered her. He stepped back. Too fast. Marcus moved instantly. "Sir." But Richard slammed the door. Locks clicked. Sarah cursed. "Go." Marcus kicked the door open. The house exploded into motion. Richard was already running toward the back. A lamp crashed. A chair flipped. Sarah chased him through the kitchen as thunder shook the windows. He was old, but fear made him fast. He reached the back door. Marcus grabbed him. They hit the floor hard. Richard fought like a man trying to escape his own past. But the past was stronger. Handcuffs snapped shut. The kitchen went silent except for rain and heavy breathing. Richard stared at the floor, then whispered something so quietly Sarah almost missed it. "I thought she was forgotten." Sarah stood over him. "No," she said. She was waiting. Silence. Then she looked at Emily's photo, still clutched in her hand. 34 years. A mother who died without answers. A father who spent every birthday at a grave. A younger brother who grew old wondering who took his sister away. And now, maybe justice. But Sarah had worked cold cases long enough to know something dangerous. The first answer usually created 10 new questions. And this case was far from over. Because Richard Hale was not supposed to exist. Not according to the original investigation. Back then, police had focused on another man. Emily's ex-boyfriend, Jason Miller. Young, angry, jealous. He had no alibi. The town hated him. The police nearly arrested him. But there wasn't enough proof. He moved away, and his life was destroyed anyway. For decades, everyone believed Jason was probably guilty. Even Sarah, when she first opened the file. But DNA didn't care about rumors. DNA only cared about truth. And truth had just walked out of Richard Hale's front door in handcuffs. Back at the station, the interrogation room felt colder than usual. Richard sat quietly, staring at the table. No lawyer yet. No confession. Just silence. Sarah placed Emily's file in front of him. You remember her? He said nothing. Marcus sat beside the wall, watching. Sarah opened the file slowly. She worked nights at Dawson's Diner. She was studying nursing. She wanted to move to Seattle. Still nothing. She trusted people too easily, Sarah continued. She thought the world was kinder than it really was. Richard's hands tightened. Small movement. But enough. Sarah leaned forward. We found your DNA. He finally looked up. His eyes were old, tired, but not surprised. That science thing, he muttered. Sarah didn't blink. Genealogy. He gave a weak laugh. Funny, isn't it? I survived police, witnesses, mistakes, and I get caught because some cousin wanted to learn about his family tree. Marcus crossed his arms. Justice works in strange ways. Richard looked down again. For a moment, he looked less like a monster and more like a man crushed by time. But Sarah had seen that before. Regret was not innocence. Tell us what happened, she said. He shook his head. No. Why? His answer came fast. Because that's not the whole story. Sarah froze. Marcus stepped forward. What does that mean? Richard looked at Emily's photo. His face went pale. And when he spoke, his voice barely sounded human. I wasn't alone. The room went still. Rain tapped softly against the station windows. Sarah's heart pounded. Because cold cases were supposed to end with one name, one arrest, one answer. But now, the dead were speaking again. And they were saying there was more. Much more. Sarah sat slowly. Who was with you? Richard stared at the wall. Silence stretched like wire. Then finally, he whispered one name. A name from the old case file. A name no one expected. Jason Miller, Emily's ex-boyfriend. The man everyone believed was innocent. The man who had disappeared 30 years ago. Marcus looked at Sarah. Sarah felt the room tilt beneath her. Because if Richard was telling the truth, then the entire case had been wrong from the beginning. And somewhere out there, a man everyone had stopped looking for might still be hiding. But when they reopened Jason Miller's evidence box and looked inside, what they found changed everything. Inside the old evidence room, the air smelled like dust, paper, and forgotten mistakes. Detective Sarah Bennett stood under the cold white lights, staring at the gray box labeled Jason Miller, Person of Interest, 1988. 34 years. That box had been sitting there longer than some officers in the building had been alive. Marcus Reed placed it carefully on the metal table. No one touched this in years, he said. Sarah put on gloves. Let's find out why. She opened it slowly. Inside were the usual things. Old interview transcripts. Polaroid photographs. A faded wallet photo of Emily smiling beside Jason at a summer fair. Receipts. Parking tickets. Handwritten notes from detectives who had retired or died. But something felt wrong. Too neat. Too clean. As if someone had wanted the truth buried. Marcus flipped through a folder. Look at this. He handed her an interview report. Jason had told police he and Emily broke up 2 months before she disappeared. He admitted they argued. He admitted he was angry. But he also said something strange. He said Emily had been scared of someone else. A man who came into the diner often. Older. Quiet. Always watching. Back then, detectives ignored it. They were focused on Jason. The angry ex-boyfriend. The easy suspect. Sarah felt frustration rise in her chest. They had missed it. Or worse. They chose to miss it. Richard Hale, she whispered. Marcus nodded. Looks like Emily tried to warn them. Sarah kept digging. Then she found it. A sealed envelope. No official stamp. No report number. Just one handwritten word. Private. Marcus frowned. That shouldn't be here. Sarah opened it. Inside was a single cassette tape. Old. Worn. and a note attached. Interview never submitted. The room went quiet. Marcus looked at her. Play it. Minutes later, they sat in the small media room. The cassette clicked. Static filled the speakers. Then a young woman's voice. Shaky. Scared. Emily Dawson. Sarah sat forward. Even after all these years, the fear in Emily's voice felt alive. I don't know if this matters, Emily said on the tape, but there's this man, he keeps coming to the diner. A pause. He doesn't do anything wrong. He just watches. Every night. Same booth. Same coffee. He knows my name, even though I never told him. Sarah looked at Marcus. Richard. Emily kept speaking. Jason thinks I'm overreacting. He says I'm just nervous. But last week, when I left work, I saw that man parked outside my apartment. Her breathing got heavier. I told Officer Grant, but he said there wasn't enough to report. Silence. Then, the final words. If something happens to me, please don't let them say I imagined it. The tape ended. Static. Nothing else. Marcus swore under his breath. Sarah stared at the machine. Emily had tried to tell them. She had reached for help. And no one listened. That wasn't just failure. That was betrayal. Who was Officer Grant? Marcus asked. Sarah checked the old reports. Retired. 78. Still alive. She stood up. We're going to see him. Officer Daniel Grant lived alone in a quiet house outside the city. The kind of place where old men sat on porches and watched the world move without them. He opened the door, slowly. Wrinkled face. Sharp eyes. He recognized the badges immediately. I was wondering when someone would come, he said. Sarah held up the tape. You knew. Grant sighed and invited them inside. His living room was filled with old police plaques and faded photographs. Ghosts of a career. He sat heavily in a chair. I knew enough, he said. Not enough to stop it. Sarah didn't sit. Emily came to you. Yes. And you buried her complaint. Grant looked ashamed. Yes. Marcus stepped forward. Why? Grant rubbed his hands together. Because Richard Hale had friends. Sarah frowned. What kind of friends? Grant looked at her carefully. The kind that protect people. Silence. Then he said the name. Sheriff Thomas Hale. Richard's older brother. The sheriff in 1988. The man who controlled the investigation. Sarah felt cold. This was bigger than a killer. This was corruption. Grant continued. Richard had problems. People knew it. Women talked. Complaints disappeared. Thomas made sure of that. Why didn't you fight it? Sarah asked. His eyes filled with regret. Because I was a coward. The honesty hit harder than excuses. He looked at Emily's photo on the table. I still hear her voice, he said. Every night. Sarah's anger softened, but only slightly. Because regret didn't bring people back. Jason Miller, she said. Did he know? Grant nodded slowly. Yes. He confronted Richard the night Emily disappeared. Marcus stepped in. And Grant looked away. No one saw Jason after that. The room froze. Sarah's voice dropped. You think Richard killed him too? Grant swallowed. I think Richard didn't work alone. Outside, thunder rolled across the sky. The same kind of storm Sarah imagined that happened the night Emily died. Marcus looked at Sarah. This is turning into 2 murders. Sarah shook her head. No. She looked at the old sheriff's photo hanging on the wall. This may be much worse. That night, Sarah went home but couldn't sleep. The tape played again and again in her mind. Emily's voice. Please don't let them say, I imagined it. Sarah sat at her kitchen table with files spread everywhere. She stared at Sheriff Thomas Hale's old records, promotions, awards, community praise, a perfect public image. But perfect images often hid ugly truths. Then her phone rang. Marcus. His voice was urgent. You need to get here now. Sarah grabbed her coat. What happened? We searched Richard Hale's property again. Her heart tightened. And Marcus paused, then said the words that changed everything. We found a second burial site. Sarah stopped breathing. Whose? We don't know yet. Rain slammed against her windshield as she drove. Her mind raced. If Jason was buried there, the case would explode. Not just murder. A cover-up. A sheriff protecting his own brother. An innocent man blamed. A woman forgotten. And maybe more victims still hidden. When she arrived, crime scene lights cut through the darkness like knives. The backyard was alive with officers. Mud. Flashlights. Silence. Marcus stood near the edge of the woods. His face told her everything before he spoke. This wasn't one grave, he said. Sarah looked down. The earth had been opened. And beneath it, there was not one body, not two, but bones. Several sets. Different sizes. Different years. Different lives. The forest had been keeping secrets for decades. Sarah felt sick. Because Richard Hale had not been hiding one crime. He had been hiding a cemetery. And standing beside it, under the cold blue lights, she realized something terrifying. Emily Dawson was never the only victim. She was just the one who finally helped them find the rest. The forest was silent. Too silent. Only the sound of rain touching leaves and the distant hum of police radios broke the darkness. Detective Sarah Bennett stood at the edge of the excavation site, staring into the open ground. Flashlights moved slowly across the mud. Forensic teams worked carefully. Every brushstroke revealed another secret, another bone, another life. What they found behind Richard Hale's property was no longer a cold case. It was a graveyard. Marcus Reed walked toward her, his face pale. They've confirmed at least 6 sets of remains, he said. Sarah closed her eyes for a second. 6. Maybe more. She looked back at the trees. For decades, people had walked past this place. Kids played nearby. Families drove by. And under the soil, the truth waited. Any ID yet? She asked. Marcus nodded slowly. One possible match. He handed her a report. Jason Miller. Sarah stared at the name. The man everyone blamed. The man people whispered about for 30 years. The angry ex-boyfriend. The suspect. The monster. And now, possibly another victim. She felt anger rise inside her. Not just at Richard. At the system. At the people who chose the easy answer instead of the hard truth. Emily lost her life. Jason lost his future. And Richard Hale lived peacefully with grandchildren and backyard barbecues. That was the real horror. Not monsters hiding in shadows. Monsters hiding in normal life. Back at the station, Richard Hale sat in the interrogation room again. But this time he looked smaller. Not weaker. Just smaller. Like the truth had finally made him human. Sarah entered alone. No file. No notes. Just Emily's photo. She placed it on the table between them. Richard stared at it. Long silence. Then Sarah asked the question. How many? His hands trembled. Slightly. But enough. I don't know, he whispered. She didn't move. That's not good enough. He looked tired. Like a man who had been running for 40 years and finally realized there was nowhere left to go. It started with Emily, he said. Sarah's chest tightened. Tell me. He swallowed hard. She was kind to me. The words sounded wrong. Broken. She smiled. She asked how my day was. She remembered my coffee order. His eyes stayed on the table. I thought it meant something. Sarah said nothing. Because she had heard this before. The terrible mistake of obsession pretending to be love. She told me no, he continued. She said I was making her uncomfortable. She said if I came near her again, she'd call the police. His voice cracked. I got angry. Silence. Heavy. Ugly. And Jason? Sarah asked. Richard's jaw tightened. He came after me. He knew. He followed me that night. Her heart pounded. And Richard whispered it. He tried to stop me. Sarah looked away for a second. Because now she knew. Jason had not failed Emily. He had tried. And he paid for it. Tears burned behind her eyes. But she kept her voice steady. And the others? Richard looked up. For the first time, there was no hiding. Some were accidents. Some were choices. Some. I told myself they deserve it. His voice shook. But after a while, I stopped needing reasons. That sentence filled the room like poison. Because that was the truth of evil. Sometimes it begins with anger. Then it becomes habit. Then it becomes normal. Sarah stood. She had heard enough. But before she reached the door, Richard spoke again. There's something else. She turned slowly. His face had gone pale. My brother. Sheriff Thomas Hale. Even dead, his shadow was still in the room. He knew, Richard said. He helped clean it up. He said family protects family. Sarah felt cold all over. How much did he know? Richard laughed bitterly. Everything. The walls of the case shifted again. Not just murder. Protection. Power. Silence. Generations of it. She left the room without another word. Because some truths were too ugly to hear twice. The news spread across the country. Headlines everywhere. Cold case solved after 34 years. DNA technology exposes hidden killer. Former sheriff linked to cover up. Families came forward. Old missing persons reports reopened. People who had spent decades without answers now had names to grieve. It wasn't peace, but it was truth. And sometimes truth is the closest thing to peace. Emily Dawson's younger brother, Daniel Dawson, asked to meet Sarah. They sat on a bench outside the courthouse. He was older now than Emily ever got to be. That thought broke something inside her. He held Emily's old photo carefully. She used to sing all the time, he said. Terribly. Loudly. She embarrassed everyone. Sarah smiled softly. He looked at the courthouse. For years, I hated Jason Miller. I hated him because it was easier than not knowing. His voice cracked. I wish I could apologize. Sarah nodded. So do I. He looked at her. Do you think justice happened? She took a long breath. Then answered honestly. I think truth happened. Justice is smaller than people think. He stared at the photo. Then whispered. At least she came home. And somehow, that felt heavier than everything else. Weeks later, the case was closing. Files were updated. Charges finalized. Reports completed. But Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that something still sat wrong. Late one night, she returned to the evidence room. She opened the original box again. Jason Miller, person of interest. She stared at the old photograph. Then noticed something she had missed before. A note clipped behind it. Handwriting. Not Jason's. Emily's. Small. Quick. She unfolded it carefully. It was simple. Just one sentence. If anything happens to me, Jason tried to protect me. Sarah sat there in silence. All these years, the truth had been sitting inside the box. Ignored. Forgotten. Waiting. She closed her eyes. Because sometimes cases are not solved by brilliant detectives. Sometimes they are solved because the dead refuse to stay silent. She placed the note back gently, turned off the light, and walked out. But before she left, she looked back once more. At the shelves. At the boxes. At the names. Hundreds of them. Cold cases. Unfinished stories. People still waiting. She whispered into the dark. I'm still watching. Then she closed the door. Because somewhere, another file was waiting. Another family. Another truth buried under years of silence. And now, with DNA listening to whispers, fewer killers could hide forever. If you think this story was intense, you're not ready for the next one.